Okay, let's step right back in time for this explainer. I really want you to imagine the full sensory reality of the Victorian era for a second. Picture the cobblestone streets, right? You've got that dense, heavy smell of coal smoke hanging in the air, the constant clatter of horse-drawn carriages, and folks navigating this rapidly changing world in these incredibly heavy, structured garments. Today, we're moving way past those sensationalized historical tropes. We're going to really inhabit this era to understand the daily lives, the constraints, and the absolute systemic realities that ordinary people faced. We're going to see exactly how they understood their world and uncover the hidden, and honestly often terrifying, true cost of everyday elegance. So, to set the stage for our intellectual journey here, we really have to ask ourselves a profound question. Why on earth did an entire civilization embrace fashion that could literally kill them? Sitting comfortably in the modern age, it's so easy for us to just brush off our ancestors as vain or, frankly, a bit foolish. But here's the thing. Human beings are inherently rational within the context of their own time. To truly understand their choices, we have to examine their constraints. We have to look at their deeply held desires for status and the massive industrial systems pushing ordinary people toward these dangerous garments. They were navigating a totally brand new world, doing the absolute best they could with the information they had. Section 1. The Illusion of Elegance, Democratizing Beauty in a New Era. Right, so the Industrial Revolution brought on some truly profound shifts in material aesthetics. For the very first time in history, mass production meant the working and middle classes could finally access new materials. Beauty wasn't just for the aristocratic elite anymore. But, and this is a big but, these materials were completely unregulated. Imagine a woman walking down a gaslit street. Her skirt makes this heavy, stiff, rustling sound. That sound was a massive status symbol. It signaled wealth and modernity. But to get that coveted volume on a budget, manufacturers treated cheap silk with metallic salts like tin or lead. This process was known as weighting or dynamiting. Sure, it gave the illusion of luxury, but it made the fabric prone to literally rotting right off the wear. And worse, it made it incredibly flammable. Section 2. Combustible couture, the fire hazard of volume. The physical dangers of these early synthetic materials were actually hiding in plain sight, right in the most mundane, everyday objects. To democratize luxury items like tortoiseshell or ivory combs, manufacturers turned to celluloid, which was an early plastic. But what consumers just didn't grasp was that this stuff was made from a highly flammable nitrate. It was essentially gun cotton. Picture a woman sitting comfortably near a roaring open hearth in a parlor, right? She's reading a book, wearing a beautiful celluloid comb in her hair. She is wearing a highly combustible explosive just inches from an open flame, totally unaware of the danger resting right on her head. Thousands. That is the number of individuals who perished in crinoline fires. This was not a rare tragedy. The danger of fire wasn't just in hair accessories. It was built into the very architecture of their clothing. The crinoline was this massive, structured cage made of steel hoops designed to hold out those heavy skirts. And sure, it freed women from wearing dozens of heavy petticoats, but it created an enormous spatial footprint. In crowded, firelit rooms, these expansive skirts would easily brush up against open grates. And once ablaze, the restrictive structure of the hoops made it nearly impossible for the wearer to quickly put out the flames or even escape the garment. It's a truly horrifying reality. Section 3. The Poisoned Palette, a Lethal Hue. Now, after centuries of drab, earth-toned clothing for the masses, the 19th century just exploded with these brilliant, completely unregulated chemical dyes. And the most sought-after color? A vibrant emerald known as Scheele's green. This really reveals the sheer chemical audacity of the era. By combining copper and lethal arsenic, chemists whipped up a luminous green that looked absolutely spectacular under the newly invented gaslighting of Victorian ballrooms. The idea spread like wildfire. People literally covered their walls in it, dyed their shoes with it, and wore entire gowns completely saturated in poison. When we compare the perceived elegance of these gorgeous, vivid garments right alongside their chemical reality, we see a society making perfectly rational aesthetic choices, yet utterly blind to the toxic consequences. As a woman danced in her emerald dress, invisible flakes of arsenic would just dust off. They'd fall onto her skin, she'd breathe them into her lungs, they'd cover the ballroom floor. They were embracing this newfound beauty, completely unaware they were enveloping themselves in lethal copper arsenite. Section 4. The Architecture of Beauty, Reevaluating the Corset. Okay, so modern observers often heavily misunderstand the restrictive architecture of the corset. We have this tendency to view history through our own 21st century lens, but to truly get it, we have to look through theirs. Historian Valerie Steele points out something fascinating here. Historical reality completely challenges the simplistic narrative that corsets were just a tool of male oppression forced on passive women. Actually, scratch that assumption entirely. Powerful male authority figures and doctors fiercely opposed the practice. Yet women kept wearing them. Why? Because, as Steele notes, it allowed them to articulate sexual subjectivity in a socially acceptable way. It was this complex instrument of feminine identity and status that women actively chose to utilize to navigate the incredibly strict social hierarchies of their day.
Section 5. The industrial cost, structural violence, and the working class. To figure out who truly bore the brunt of these hazardous trends, we have to look past the glittering ballrooms. We need to look at the massive socioeconomic drivers. We're looking at a society rapidly transitioning to modern industrial capitalism, mass-producing beauty without any safety nets whatsoever. There were absolutely no public health frameworks, no FDA, zero chemical safety regulations, no labor advocacy. They were flying completely blind into the chemical age. And the byproducts of this unchecked progress, well, they had devastating human costs.
And here is the ultimate tragedy of the era, a textbook case of structural violence. The bodies of working-class laborers basically acted as a chemical filter for the industrial byproducts of the empire. A wealthy woman wearing an arsenic-dyed dress might suffer some mild skin irritation or feel a bit unwell, sure. But the textile workers? The people actually manufacturing those arsenic-laced goods suffered horrifying daily exposure. We're talking everything from skin cancer to severe systemic poisoning and respiratory failure. The working class quite literally absorbed the lethal cost just to fuel the fashion demands of the elite.
Section 6. A mirror to modernity, the risks we accept.
So, it's time to foster a little historical empathy and maybe challenge our own modern condescension. Just as the Victorians navigated the unseen hazards of arsenic and crinolines, we happily accept our own daily, normalized risks. I mean, they had arsenic face wafers. We have shower gels pumped full of toxic microplastics that end up in our bodies. They had combustible hair combs. We distract ourselves with cell phones while operating heavy machinery. They had crinolines. We accept that thousands of people perish in fast car crashes every single year as just a cost of doing business. They had lead makeup. We're still battling lingering lead paint in our homes. All of this proves they weren't foolish at all. They were simply navigating their world with the tools they had, exactly like we do today. So the absolutely crucial takeaway from this explainer is to stop and ask ourselves, how are future civilizations going to judge us? Will historians 200 years from now look back at our plastic-filled lives, our everyday conveniences, and cringe exactly the same way we cringe at their arsenic face wafers? By truly understanding the Victorians, we gain a much deeper understanding of the human condition across history. And honestly, hopefully, a little more humility about the risks we blindly accept today.